So Dave had a comment, which is producing natural products so that you can increase your profit is difficult without a marketing person to get into that higher margin. But the truth is that historically, prior to 1940, 50% of the market was homeopathic and it was natural, okay? So what happened between 1940 and 1960 was a campaign to exclusify the pharmaceutical provided services. And what happened is that they did a really good job of it and squeaked or squeezed out the natural market. Now what ended up happening was in 1980, between this 1940 and 1980, they were at 75% of the market, and 25% of the market was what we consider to be natural, or people spending their own healthcare dollar on natural substances. In the year 2000, it went back to 50-50. In the year 2010, it's eked over to where the natural market has actually increased to about 54% of the market share. It's diminishing the pharmaceutical companies' share or services provided conventionally. I don't know why it's called conventional, but ultimately the services provided by pharmaceutical subsidized services, okay? So the market is growing, it's not shrinking. So for you to be able to make your high quality lamb or beef available is there. It just is getting the word out, and that takes some networking. So the networking and what I had to offer is that in the classes that I teach around the country is people are looking for a product. So being able to make it available, I can't tell you how much work I did to get raw milk to raise my girls on, is looking for somebody that had A, a milk cow to start with, B, was willing not to immunize or to treat with antibiotics. So I offered many times through the different contacts that I had to take care of their cow from a medical point of view or to provide services so I could get clean milk. People want it. Some states it's legal, some states it's illegal to have access to things like raw milk. But the fact is there is a high demand. And unless we network, we can't find the products. What I did to manage in those first few years when my girls were little is I fed them vegetarian. Because I was unwilling to eat it until I could have a clean substance, whether that be milk, dairy, or ultimately meat. We ate game, but I didn't eat any processed meat. Once I took a look and went and did the feedlot, visited the farms, it's really kind of scary. Yes.
One thing I am concerned about game, and
yes,
not much here, but we lived in Minnesota previous to this, is that all the fields they're grazing on have been sprayed.
And they're GMO'd. So now we have a real problem. And by the way, these homeopathic remedies work just as good on bees. So I've been medicating the hives with homeopathy. So if I tell you a little bit about bees, I'll tell you a little bit about what's happening with game too. Is that they're blaming the global warming on bee problems. But the truth is that they rob their honey to start with. So they feed them sugar in barrels. They give them sugar water, which is a GMO sugar, okay? And toxic for the animal. So they're eating, or their food supply becomes sugar water. The animals get sick and they're so weak from this lack of decent diet that what they're doing is medicating the hives. So the hives are sprayed or they're dumped with powdered antibiotic. with the sugar water that they're eating, it's diminishing the population. So to get them to leave a little reserve of honey so they have their own food to eat, and then being able to immunize against the bee virus with the homeopathic remedy put in the water that they provided, have stopped the failure of that bee population in hive after hive after hive. They're thriving. The bees are bigger, healthier. They're not losing and they're not getting sick. So the same thing is happening, thanks for bringing that up with the game, is the game is eating these GMO crops that are sprayed. And if you give the bees the option to be on natural flora versus in the fields that are treated, they don't want anything to do with it. So the preference would be that they had availability to some natural groceries to eat versus those fields that are both GMO and sprayed. The GMO has really become an issue. So you're completely right that the game is contaminated to some degree with these, what's happening with the crops. But it's the insect population is also having issues, which creates problems for pollination as well as what we consider a foodstuff. So I've stopped buying things like honey, and I've talked to the people who market it, because you buy honey in the market and it says it's an all-natural product, when in reality it's not natural at all. They're being fed sugar, they're also being fed antibiotics, and what's natural about that? So when you have a product you can market that says no antibiotics, honey that's sustainable, and they're unmedicated, then people will question, well, if this one says unmedicated, is that one medicated? So the demand is for the high quality product. People are willing to pay for it, which is really amazing. But I mean, the demand is not absent, it's actually increasing. Now, marketing is by far a challenge, is a challenge, but I do have that Nebraska farmer that has 1,000+ cattle, and what he does is, if he has, and there have been years of our association in the last 8-9 years, is where he's had more cattle than he could sell in this market, and he's had to take a loss, or what he perceives to be a loss, by taking them through that regular market. Or somebody like the chains that are selling natural beef, bartering, his profit away. But it's only a small percentage of his herd. He's still able to market to this market and make that higher profit margin. But direct marketing for an operation like yours is totally and completely possible with probably the potential of a website or a link to somebody who's looking for other natural products, right? Do you market any of your beef?
Ours is mostly direct marketed, and we used to sell through a farmer's market in Minnesota, and then since we just moved back here last fall, and I've already had requests for meat that doesn't have hormones and antibiotics and things in it.
And your milk, how about that?
Yeah, that too.
You're going to need more than one milk cow.
Now that I'm tired of milking.
But there is a huge demand, so don't minimize this, what the market's really doing. The trend is going our direction. And people are looking for answers like yourself. So those, in working with the farmers that are reading Acres, and Grass Farmer is looking for solutions. So I read that one of the articles when I first started this, and one of the articles published, which was published by a vet, said if the animals are sick, A, it's your fault, their diet's not good enough. B, plan to cull 10% of your herd, period. Because if you're going to be antibiotic free, they're going to get sick and there's not much you can do about it. So the loss is going to be 10% across the board, and you need to increase the quality of the feed and the mineral supplementation. My phone rings because many of the farmers are doing it and they're still getting sick. So they want to minimize that 10% that are still getting ill. Or when they bring in new, how do they clean them up? If they're doing things like replacement heifers, how do you clean them up? So this protocol is clean up what you've got, and anything new that comes into your property. Immunize them because we want to protect them. So we're not going to be delusional that the idea of immunization is silly or ridiculous. What we want to do is give them protection. So we're going to do it homeopathically. We don't do it by creating a titer or evidence of disease. What we're doing is building the immune system through the vital force. So you'll see that they'll get sick less. The evidence is less disease. The next is to keep them healthy by assimilating that mineral you're spending your money on. Now, free choice or loose salt or loose mineral, way more significant than using mineral blocks that are pressed together. We can't use the homeopathic remedy to medicate those mineral blocks. We can, which I'll teach you how to medicate the loose mineral, put the remedy on that loose salt, okay? The next thing is this, that you have the ability to worm, which is another serious problem for having weight loss or poor quality or lack of weight gain. The coats are looking nasty or they're not shedding off as good as they should. That's the reason for the wormer, is to kick this Pro Thrive. I know that if you use Pro Thrive, you'll minimize the amount of wormer that you'd ever need. The weaning relief, also a common problem. And the weaning relief, the story that goes with the origin of the remedy for weaning was actually trying to do prevention for pneumonia. That the young calves were getting pneumonia, being separated from their moms. So they bawl and bawl and bawl, get snotty, and then that ultimately developed into pneumonia. So I used a remedy to minimize the stress of separation, and it was completely preventative for the pneumonia. So they don't bawl, they move easily, and they transition well. So using this for prevention of pneumonia is genius. But I did it based upon the emotion. Remember that every homeopathic remedy has an emotion and a physical response. So the reason we know the emotion tied to every substance is the remedies have been tested on humans. So a human can say, I feel like my head's under pressure. I feel like I've been poisoned. I feel like. So we have documented the mentals along with the physicals. So eliminating the origin of stress keeps this from moving. What comes first? The emotion. It's the stress that caused the sleeplessness and the cranky and the stomach ache. The stomach ache didn't come without the letter from the IRS. So the stress your animals are under, if we can minimize that stress, then it doesn't develop into pathology. Next one is the scours. So we want to prevent scours. And I think that scours occurs most commonly when the animals are overcrowded. They're in an environment that's unclean. And this remedy is good prophylaxis for scours. It will also treat scours. And scours is dangerous due to the dehydration that follows, right? So really an important remedy for you to have. Alfalfa booster. I made alfalfa booster as a remedy for the dairies that were trying to increase milk production. It also helps weight gain. That's another reason that we supplement the animals that are you're choosing to grass feed. So alfalfa really as a remedy increases the weight gain on the diet that they're currently on. The other thing it does is it also balances nitrate problems. So if the animal's getting too much sugar, like the horses, that get into ketosis and other things that affect their kidneys or the high or low sugars, this remedy balances the nitrates and sugar. So helps with weight gain, balances what's going on with some of the plants in the pasture. Significant also for sheep, because sheep get in trouble really easy eating random plants in the pasture. They can get in trouble, and that's really kind of, in my opinion, a good spring remedy for bloat prevention. There's also a remedy for treating the acute crisis of bloat, and I did put this kit together mainly to increase vitality and then to do prevention. If you actually need to treat, the packet that you've received in front of you there gives you a list of what else is available, like remedies for foot rot. I find that foot rot and pink eye often occur together, and that more uniquely in the last few years. So using foot rot and pink eye together for prevention is highly recommended if that's a problem in your area. Now, the next remedy, if you're looking at your remedy list, is for foul discharge. And what that is ailments of breeding. So if you're not AIing, it is for eliminating what we would refer to as sexually transmitted diseases. So this is for treatment both for the bull or ram you may be using, as well as the discharge that it produces. It works famously well and will eliminate any need for antibiotics to suppress that disorder.
I have a question.
Sure.
If I can go back to the weaning. If I remember right, the recommendation was that you treat the calves 3 to 7 days before separation. That's not really practical for us. We could treat them 3 to 7 days after we take them off the cows, but they're out on pasture. We get them home and take the calves off. Does it do any?
Are they drinking water, or are they getting into the mineral at all?
Yeah.
So that's how we're going to do it.
So you can put it in the mineral when they're out in pasture. Can you use all the remedies in the loose mineral?
Yes. So we have 3 methods for which we can medicate the animals. I was lucky because I had all of them basically in a fenced area, and I provided the water. I didn't have a running stream. I didn't have a windmill. I didn't have it ever flowing on the ground. I didn't have a river. Now all these places that I've been have all of those plus other problems where they don't have contained water. So it created a challenge for me to come up with a solution. So there's 3 different ways that we can medicate the animals. Now remember that if we're going to do a difference, truthfully, important difference is medicating an animal that's sick is different than doing prevention. Okay? So there's an urgency with an acute problem. If you have an animal that has scours, it's very acute. If you have something that has a respiratory complaint in an animal, it's very acute. So in the case of these acute crises or the feeling that you need to do something urgently, you want to give the remedy direct. So to use the remedy direct, we're going to take the master that you have in your kit, or if you have the larger bottles, and dispense a teaspoon into a half a gallon of water. Once the teaspoon is in the half a gallon of water, it says specifically here that you need to succuss it. So we're going to take that half a gallon. If it turns out to be a jug half full, then we can succuss that water. Succuss means banging it and shaking it together. Once it's succussed, the water becomes the remedy. Now we can transfer that water into a sprayer. So depending on the size of your operation or your proximity to the animals, if you can use a 1-quart sprayer, like you might use as fly spray or a Windex size bottle as an example. In that 1-quart clean sprayer, you can spray the animal directly. You have to spray them in a mucous membrane. So we're going to spray them in the face. If you can get it in their mouth, more power to you. but getting it on their nose where they lick, or in their eyes is a little tender. But if you can spray them on their nose or face, then they're going to lick that off, and we're going to get our dose of Remedi. We can use it acutely in this urgent state every 5 minutes, 3 times in a row. So if you can squirt them 3 times, and then you repeat that as you make your rounds or come back around. If you can get it to them 3 times and then 3 times within an hour or more, the results are exponentially faster than if you go out later that night and do it again. So in that acute or urgent state, we want to spray them. Now if you do it in a 1-gallon sprayer, the difference between a quart sprayer and a 1-gallon sprayer is the distance that it'll spray. No different than this spritz bottle that we use for our pets. So if we want to spray this, we can spray this in the mouth of a cat, the dog, and potentially your buddy the horse. But it's very difficult to do an animal that's not happy with you, because this only spritzes about 6 inches. So putting it in the larger bottle allows you to have distance to get it to the animal's mucous membrane.
And then how much spray has to make?
A drop would do it. So if you saturate them with that spray, you get them obviously wet, you're good.
Yeah, for one treatment. I mean, our cattle are pretty gentle, but if I did something that they aren't already accustomed to, like to spray them and got them all wet, the next time...
You don't want to get them all wet. And you don't want to be brutal, you want to be gentle. This comes out gently. So my instructions say gently. You don't want to be abusive, okay? But it's not unpleasant, it's water, okay?
But they still react to things in funny ways. I mean, when I have treated our cows at home with my starter kit, in this head catch, I was a little surprised that some of them really reacted to the spritzing. Others didn't. But they don't all act the same.
So in keeping with the energy that you're trying to produce, which is kindness and compassion, tell them your intention. Okay? It works. All right? And make it a positive influence instead of a scary one.
Okay, so a little bit of mist from a distance is adequate?
As long as you get it on them. You can't mist them in the air. Okay, you got to get it on their face, and preferably you're aiming for their nose. Yeah. Okay.
But the dosage is maybe a little more flexible.
Right, because anywhere from a drop to a mouthful will work just perfectly fine. Once you've succussed that water, and you've put it in a spray, then you can individually spray your animals that are acutely in danger. Okay? The more frequently you use it, the faster you're going to get results. Results can be as quick as 10 minutes to bring a fever down or to eliminate pain, like in the case of mastitis or scours. The scours should begin to show signs of improvement. Okay? Like the quantity, the frequency will change. Okay? By the next day, they should look significantly better. Yes, Deb.
So, like you're saying, if they make a comment and say my cow has mastitis, the immediate treatment would be to tell them how to do the immediate treatment of mastitis, but then go ahead and say what you need to do is start getting them to a healthier level of when you start again.
So let me read this to you. The very first thing that if you can do prevention ahead of time is to go through this process.
Right.
If they call and say, I want to medicate for mastitis, right, without this process, now we're going to have to treat them as a sick animal. Right. So in your directions and your directives here, it says, for medicating an individual animal that needs immediate care, this is always the fastest and most direct method. Results should be obvious and signs of improvement begins from 10 minutes to 2 or 3 days. Spritz from the ready-to-use spritz bottle directly in their mouth, nose, or vulva of the animal. And vulva does not work for sheep. They're way too hairy for that unless they're down, okay? So the face is easier. This is really for dairy cattle that you can use the vulva because they're, it's available to you in plain view. It says use the spritz every 5 minutes 3 times in a row. Repeat it 3 more times 20 minutes to an hour later. Repeat again when you make the rounds looking for obvious signs of improvement. Signs of improvement will be general energy increased, discharge or fever reduced, improved breathing, willing to eat or drink. Keep this up for 3 to 5 days as long as you see improvement every day. If you don't see improvement, you have the incorrect remedy. Help is available for making additional selections by calling the office or a field expert. Depicting the symptoms versus the name of the disease is most effective. So if they're going to be red and hot, we're going to pick a different remedy as an example than we would if it was yellow-green. Okay? So based upon the symptoms, we can select the remedy more appropriately. It's really common to pick the name of the disease instead of the way they're experiencing it. I name the remedy combinations by the common depictions of the complaint. It is not the only way to treat, okay? It's just the most effective combinations with my experience in the field. It's the most helpful. So now, method 2. Method 2 is for medicating multiple animals. We're going to mix 1 teaspoon of the master formula in a gallon jug half full of water. It's really important that it be half full, and the reason is that succussion is an important part of imprinting the remedy on the water. So it's really, if you use a quart jar, I want it half full. Okay? It says bristly pound the jug on the palm of your hand or on a towel on the workbench to the count of 10. This process is medicating the quantity of water, and you must not miss this step. Then the water can be put into a quart, 1 or 2 gallon sprayer, sprayed gently in the face, which means nose or mouth of the animal in the pasture. Shoot or while loading, during branding, etc. When they're coming or pushing a lot of the animals in the operations through the chute, it's a great job to give somebody to immunize them or give them their ProThrive or worm them while they're going through the chute, doing whatever else they're doing. From ear tags, branding, whatever they're doing. If you don't do that, you're going to have to take another opportunity to give it to them. If you call them by name and say sweetly, I would like to immunize you for your own protection, out of love and compassion, they'll open their mouth for you, I swear. Okay?
Can you give multiple dosages all in the same application? I mean, so you would be giving wormer and bug minimizer? 2
remedies at a time. You can do 2 at a time. So it says, the larger sprayer gives you greater distance if you're using a 4-wheeler or from your truck. The direct method should be repeated AM and PM for sick animals for up to 3 to 5 days with obvious improvement. The remedies work so well that if you don't get results, you either missed spraying them or you have the remedy wrong. Okay? So at that particular point, we want to choose a better remedy. It says immunizing, which is homeopathic prophylaxis, is we use the method 2, which we just talked about, which you're going to spray them. Remember to do new additions to your herd. I also recommend, based upon the combination of remedies I've put together, that you do that at the fall when the season changes, when they're going from wet feed to dry. It does a great deal of prevention overall, and they'll breeze through the season change for you, not be so vulnerable. I recommend the second dose before the cold weather hits in the fall. This protection and prevention is of great value. This immunizing process may be combined with other reasons that you have, again, putting the remedy or the animals through the chute, including branding. Many diseases of multiple names will be prevented with this method and formulation. Names of diseases change with pharma drug treatments available and are ever changing. So you want to make sure that you depict what you see.
I have a question about
Yes.
immunizations.
Yes.
Do you do that biannually in just the young animals or all the animals?
You can do all animals.
Do you need to?
What's really great is if you do it in the fall, as an example, annually, you'll prevent the, increase their vitality and decrease the vulnerability through the cold season here in this part of the country. And last year everywhere was cold, right? A lot of stress for the animals. Not getting to feed, not getting good water, frozen water. So it's really helpful. It's not required, but it's very helpful. So method 3 is for maintenance and prevention, not treatment of a sickly herd or animal. You spray the sick animals directly for the best results. Make the medicated water, as in method 2. Now spray the loose salt with the remedy. So it says 1 ranch hand pours the loose salt from the bag slowly into tubs or buckets while the other ranch hand sprays it with the remedy. Repeat this operation twice to make sure that the salt is medicated. Put out the treated salt-free choice like the usual operation. This remedy will coat the salt and make its way via the mucous membrane, which is a mouth with saliva of your animals. This method is very effective, produces results over 90%. The reason that it's 90% is if you choose not to eat the salt. So it says you may miss a few due to the free choice option. So if you can't get it on them directly, you can do prevention with the salt. So doing ProThrive by salt, by doing any remedy you select for prevention, like the question you asked me was weaning, you can spray the salt. Okay? Yes?
Can you use more than 2 remedies at a time in the salt, or do you need this?
You can use 2 remedies in combination with whatever method you select. Now, what needs to be on the salt on a regular basis is that mineral absorption. What's it called, girls? So, if you put that on the salt and then you decide to spray it again with something else that you need to use urgently, go ahead, do it. Spray it and put it out.
Just to be clear.
Yes, sir?
If I'm using Pro Vitality recommended every week.
Yes.
Is in their loose mineral
Yes.
choice. And the cattle wormer recommended monthly. If like the beginning of the month, I add that to the mineral. Then
Sure.
I'm using 2 remedies.
Yes, sir.
But then if I get into the fall before weaning, I can add the weaning to the mineral if I drop the wormer. And so I have ProThrive and weaning.
Yes, exactly.
That would be okay.
Exactly. Perfect.
And now we touched on administering it through the water.
What you're medicating for water here is just a quart that you're spraying them with, or a gallon that you're spraying them with.
So it doesn't matter the volume of the water, how much of the remedy you put in. You mix up.
You're using 1 teaspoon to a half a gallon of water.
And then adding that to the water that the cattle are drinking.
If you're going to do that, it's not on this sheet. I've given you 3 options. Spray them directly, spray them from the spritz bottle, spray them as a group from the half a gallon of water solution with 1 teaspoon. And the other one I've given you is to spray the mineral. If you want to medicate the water, it's a little more complicated. So if, let's say, that you have cattle in your barn that don't feel good, okay? So you've gone out, you've rounded them up, you now have them in one place. The method for doing that is you can spray them directly, which I like better because they're sick, and then I know they got it. Sick animals oftentimes don't eat and drink, so then you're not sure if they got a drink or not. You're not sure they eaten the free choice mineral because they don't feel good. So now it becomes significant that you spray them, so you know you medicated them. Now, if you want to put it in the water, what you're going to do is you're going to take that half a gallon of medicated water that you succussed, you pour it in the bottom of a stock tank and fill it with water. And the remedy then becomes very indirect. It's a little slower to give you results, but it will do it. I use it mainly for prevention. I don't use it to treat a sick animal, with exception. Okay? I have a sick animal. I've sprayed them directly. I can also put it in the water, leave it for them, because I got other things to do. And if they drink it, I'm thrilled, because now I know I got another dose in there.
But it doesn't work to pour it into the water that's already in the tank?
No, because you can't succuss it.
I mean, if you've already succussed it in your half gallon.
You need to pour it in the bottom of the tank and fill it so that you're succussing it into the water. If you pour it into a stock tank, and I had this problem when the guys had tanks that were overflowing. They literally, my naivety, truthfully, they went out there and spritzed the water while it's running on the ground and thought they medicated the stock tank. So I got very literal about how I wanted that water medicated. So medicating the water causes a problem for me, because everybody's opinion about how to accomplish that is different, including putting it in running water. That's an issue. Now, for people who have inline tanks, and especially if you have clients that have inline tanks, medicating the inline tank is brilliant for the automatic waterers. If you succuss the gallon, you dump it in the inline tank, you fill the inline tank so it's all succussed, and that goes out to all the animal waterers. Brilliant. Brilliant. But that's not common. Common is they're out in the pasture with a creek running by, or the tanks are overfilling. So I took the water option away because it was not being used appropriately to get good saturation.
That's why I was confused. There was a couple of references in the literature to
Yes.
administering it through the water.
Yes, and I did it myself because I had a stock tank. The size of the stock tank doesn't matter. The method matters. So if it's a 50-gallon tank or a 500-gallon tank, doesn't make any difference. But you have to put it in empty and fill the tank. And that seemed really difficult. What was universal amongst the ranches was loose mineral. And the truth is that we take and we medicate sugar homeopathically. And it's a stable carrier. It's a preservative. It lasts forever. The remedies never go bad stored properly. They last into infinity. All right, so how about questions or challenges about things that people ask of you, or dilemmas that you have in your herd? We're going to have, the goal for you is no ticks, right? So we'll give them 30 days on ProThrive once a week after you use that alternative immunizer, and see if the ticks are out of here. The same thing will happen. Their coats will look pretty. Their stools will be clean instead of sticking all over the back of their coat. Okay?
So most of the time they don't get ticks, and I do an herbal wormer,
You won't even need it.
and so that will be no more.
You won't need it. Because herbs are actually medicines. They're natural medicines. The difference between a natural med and a prescription med, or a med that is chemically produced, is they synthesize the natural ingredient in many herbal substances. So herbs are natural drugs. They're poisoning the system to clean it out. Does that make sense? Yes, ma'am.
What about cattle grubs? Preventing the cattle grubs from heel flies?
So explain to me what you see.
Well, there's a fly that comes out in the spring, and they lay an egg on the animal's hair above its heels, and then that gets licked off, and they swallow it, and it migrates and comes out under the skin in the back, and it makes a great big lump with a grub in it. And if they're not treated, there's a little air hole in the skin, and if they're not treated, then in the spring they supposedly come out. But they routinely treat to prevent those in cattle because they ruin the hides.
So in the ProThrive remedy is silica. And silica will prevent anything under the skin from living there. It will force it out, okay, like a splinter. So it will force its removal, won't be able to harbor there, number one. Number two, the animals should not, the fly, lay the egg on the animal's hair when the animal's healthy. So I'd love the feedback to see if that solves for you.
And we don't have a problem. We used to have a problem in Montana, and then after we moved to Minnesota, we didn't have it there. But now we moved back, so I'm thinking that...
If I need to custom formulate something for you, you need to let me know, and I'd be happy to do that. But I think the silica will do prevention for allowing it to live there, number one. And number two, they won't deposit it. When animals get things like humans get chiggers around their ankles, it's a calcium absorption problem. So by forcing the calcium to absorb, I don't think that'll occur at all.
Okay. Does that work the same on horses for the botflies?
Sure. Now each one of the types of animals, the horses, the cattle, the sheep, the swine, and poultry all have unique wormers. So the formulas are not the same. The immunizations or homeopathic prophylaxis in every breed are different. So you can't mix those up or assume that you're going to get protection because their vulnerabilities are completely different. Okay? Birds carry tuberculosis. Common that tuberculosis is in all the breeds of animals. And the number one way to spread it is birds, right? That's the way we get influenza, as birds. They consider cowbirds to be one of the biggest spreaders of disease, period, right? So what you want to do is you will not be free of exposure. You cannot keep your environment clean. It's impossible. The wind blows, the birds fly, the diseases travel. The only way you can prevent disease is to build immunity, because the diseases are ever present. Like for us on doorknobs, on silverware in restaurants, as well as other surfaces, the diseases are ever present. The exposure is not the issue. You cannot clean your environment. What you're going to do is build their immunity so they don't get sick. I did make a reference to plants. Is that I did make a remedy for the plants. I did call it Pro Thrive. I also put some remedies in there that were antifungal. And it works pretty dang good. It can be put in foliar feeders. It can be used exactly the way the remedies are and sprayed on the plants. The experiments, the limited experiments, I have to tell you, of using the remedy in commercial operations has been all positive. The goal is not to grow things we don't want to grow. Like in a greenhouse, if we can get all the plants to grow, that means that plants we don't want to grow may show up too. So I'm working on that concept, is can we minimize the weeds when we want to make everything green and healthy, right? But it really helps the uptake of the minerals for the plants. And the soybean crops that we put it on produced more the year they used it than any other year. So our results have been pretty good so far. The same thing with the fodder houses. We were able to increase the growth, which is in a shorter amount of time. It's very exciting in sprouting grain for the operations that we're using.
How often?
Fodder.
When you water?
One a week, just like you would put out the Pro Thrive for the animals. Okay, works just the same. But I'm trying to minimize the parasites as well, and so far it's doing a good job. And oftentimes the weather will denote vulnerabilities to different parasites. So we'll see how we do if we get a longer track record than 5 years and 10 commercial operations. I like to bump it up, but so far it has a lot of positive feedback. All right, Do you mind if we run through the rest of this list for treating and give you some options? I did produce some directions or protocols for each one of these conditions. We went through the first 7 already. The 7th one being the weaning is I wrote you a note that says this remedy is truly a miracle. Use daily 3 to 7 days before separation. So if that turns out to be by mineral for you, it'll work?
Yeah.
Okay. So what you're going to look for is what?
Oh, when I'm using it?
Yes.
Right, calves.
You want much quieter calves. They should be a lot happier. Same thing's going to happen with the mothers. Way less stress for them too. Okay? They're going to get some of that mineral out there as well, right? When you throw it out free choice? Okay. So you want to give me feedback about both populations.
Sure.
Okay. All right. So what it's actually doing is preventing sadness from separation, which is the reason that they're bawling. And what's the result of that is snotty, drooling, what else? And potentially pneumonia.
That's pneumonia if it's dry.
So ultimately we're going to prevent pneumonia. That's the big goal. The whining isn't near as bad as what it produces, which is pneumonia. All right. So the next one is the foot rot. It said this remedy should be used daily for a week. This is for treatment. It's much nicer, by the way, if you do prevention. Results should be obvious. Now, we just recently had a rancher that had 1,200 or so plus sheep, and he had foot rot. Now, I made the mistake, I have to tell you, of mailing him the cattle foot rot, which caused him huge anxiety that there wasn't a picture of a sheep on the label, not the cow. And he professed that they were completely different diseases in the sheep. So I tried desperately to convince him that the formula I made would work for either. But after a 3-day or so delay while he was befuddled by that, we finally got him to try it. And what happened? Deb, he called today?
He did call today.
And what did he say?
Absolutely amazed. Absolutely. Within the time period of all the confusion, he was seeing absolute improvement.
And the first time I talked to him after the first week of him receiving the remedy is he said, the only thing I can tell you is it's not spreading.
Right.
I'm not sure that they're better, even though when I'm cleaning their feet, it's much improved. So now we're what?
He's cutting them and they are healthier than healthy.
Good, perfect. Is that what was rotten is no longer rotten. It's new, clean flesh, right? And the hooves are no longer splitting. They're nice and healthy. So that's the goal. And the problem initially, and the reason that I would like to teach these classes or even offer the video for training, is because they don't quite understand how they're supposed to use it. This is befuddling because this is just dang weird compared to what you're used to doing, right?
That's it.
Okay, so giving you options that work is vitally important, so I'm looking for that feedback. If you're happy or you can't get it to work, there's 2 reasons. A, we're not using it right, or B, we're using the wrong formula. That's the only reason. The remedies are highly effective, okay? And we want speed. The sicker they are, the faster the remedies work. So we want to see that. Like I said, in mastitis, the fever should come down, the tenderness will go away, the inflammation goes down, the bag will soften, they'll return to normal eating and drinking. That's the intention. It'll produce results for you.
So could you use the weaning for shearing? Or would you use something different because it stresses them so much and they'd be calmer and less mixed?
Except that we would be inclined to say that's not from separation. So the emotion is wrong. What you are is that they're terrified because you're, pinning them up and going through a trauma. So the truth is that a shearing remedy should be this stress, and you have a remedy for stress. So let's say that I can put on my glasses.
Separated from the lambs at that point too.
You mean you're doing two things?
Well, yeah, when we're shearing, they've already lambed, and so they are separated somewhat from
Is that just for the hour, or is that going to be ongoing?
the hour. I was wondering if it would calm them a little bit.
I think that you could do well with loading stress or a stress remedy, and I'd be happy to make you one. And it can be used for any kind of trauma, like movement, but it's not necessarily separation from mother and young. So that's number 24. And I would say if you called my office and ordered it and told me what you were doing with it, that I'll put the remedy in there for being traumatized. Shouldn't be the least bit difficult to accomplish that. So another remedy that's really completely amazing is this retained placenta. So this does what we would consider to be a homeopathic DNC, is it will whoosh the womb clean. So the other thing that we have available homeopathically is prolapsed uterus. So if that turns out to be a problem for you before you put them down or call them, you can use a remedy for prolapsed uterus as well.
How does that work? Is it a prevention or?
No, it'll help literally pull it back up.
So it's easier to get back in, or?
Not only that, when you push it back in, you want it to stay, right? If you see signs of it or you have a vulnerability, then you can use this hormonal remedy. There's a hormonal wake-up remedy here for breeding, and it is going to be highly effective for prolapsed uterus. It works well for prolapsed bladders too, which goes with that. It lifts the whole pelvic floor actually, okay? So strengthens the pelvic floor is, I guess, what I should say. All right, so retained placenta usually presents itself with a foul discharge in a day or two that you find out you're in trouble. What other signs of retained placenta would you have?
Well, sometimes it go up.
So the other one is going to be that stinky discharge. This remedy has a really foul discharge as one of its symbols for retained placenta. So it's obvious. It says use this 3 times in a row, 5 minutes apart. Repeat it again in 20 minutes. When you come back, if it doesn't happen in your presence, it should be swift and complete clean out. These remedies have many uses. We call those in homeopathy polycrests. Remedies that can be used for more than one thing. So as an example, if your animals got into some moldy feed, this retained placenta remedy is also great for poisoning from mold. So there's a lot of things that if you call or leave us a report or are looking for help, that once you have some of these tools, they're highly effective for many things. Ketosis I talked to you a little bit about is sugar. Kidney problems, kidney diseases. I find this more commonly used for horses and the complaints about horses which are over-medicated to start with, wormed to a fault, and the animals are nervous and antsy as well. So in getting rid of the ill effects of being poisoned makes a lot of corrections in their vulnerabilities. Antifungal, that's pretty obvious. I had a steer on my place that popped up overnight with warty growths all over his face, around his eyes and down his nose. And I gave him this remedy in his water because I have a water container for him. And within 3 days it was completely gone. So very effective remedy. I get asked for this antifungal quite regularly for warty growths. It also is good for ringworm, so I made note of that too. Daily for 7 days. Diminishing bug bite and bug bite relief, 2 remedies that seem to make people a little bit befuddled. The difference between the two is one is prevention and the other one is treatment. So preventing bug bites is possible, especially mosquito and other blood-sucking insects. So minimizing is to do prevention. In bug bite relief, and again I find this more commonly used for horses, is animals that are all bumpy and itchy and irritated from being bit. That should be minimalistic in your herd once you've done ProThrive, because they shouldn't be bit up like that. But this is for treating that itchy, miserable condition. This remedy can also be used for anaphylaxis or allergies if that be a problem for you. Bug bite relief is also works very much like an antihistamine. Red, itchy, bumpy, hive-like, swollen. So lice diminish is the newest remedy. This is the first year that I've used it, and all positive feedback. I made a note that lice is a sign of poor nutrition, usually appears after a really long or a tough winter. So if they're itching along the fence, there you go. I did use some remedies for malnutrition as well as the lice, and it seems to be working very well. Pink eye relief. Now I want to talk to you a little bit about pink eye, because pink eye could be a herpetic infection. It also shows up under cowpox, the pink eye symptoms. I've done a lot of work on pink eye prevention and the origin of the pink eye complaints. This remedy is very effective for both of those situations. Now, the other unique thing about this remedy is it does repair for the damage that pink eye causes, which is the cataract. Blindness that happens very fast and very acutely in cattle. And this remedy is will be effective treatment for the animals that have been damaged by the pink eye. Don't be surprised if the cataracts resolve completely, and even that white spot that gets left behind. Injury combo is a remedy universal amongst all the animals. You can use it yourself. It's a muscle, tendon, ligament, bone, tetanus, puncture wound, cut open relief to heal at a rapid rate of speed. So if you slam your finger in the tailgate, this is the remedy you take. It'll take the pain away, 3 doses in a row, and keep your finger from turning blue and your nail from falling off. It'll do the same for your animal. If you have a broken bone, it'll help it mend at a rapid rate of speed, including providing pain relief. It can be used as quickly or as long as you need it, as often in a row. Every 5 minutes 3 times, every 20 minutes 3 times, every hour 3 times. If it's your finger that you slammed in the car door, that's the way you're going to use it. If you want to provide relief for your animal, you can use it the same way. The common way to use it is 3 to 5 times a day for up to 2 or 3 days. And then when you need it, when you're no longer in pain, or they're no longer limping, or it's obvious they can put weight on whatever was injured and or eating and drinking, you can quit using it. The remedy anti-infection is for things like an abrasion or an injury that might leave a gash or something open, a boil or an abscess that might have broke open that you want to medicate. You can use this remedy for those types of infections. An infected tooth may be another example of how to use this remedy. Is there an official name for the disease or the manifestation of a wooden tongue? The origin is Corynebacterium. C-O-Y-R-N-E. But what's the other name for that? C-O-Y-R-N-E. Corynebacterium? C-O-R-Y. Okay. So this remedy creates a bone abscess. Appears commonly on the jaw from eating something that had a stick or something sharp that punctures the gum and then creates an infection. I've been told by the vets that there are no antibiotics that are very effective for this condition. I had this happen in one of my own animals this last year that was off our property. And my husband run him into the vet because he was losing weight, looked skinny, and had this humongous grapefruit size abscess. And the vet said, the antibiotics aren't very effective. I'll give them to you anyway if you want. But he probably is not going to do very good. He's, miserable, and this is not very effective. So I gave him the immunizer. And I had him eating in 24 hours. I gave him Prothrive in his water, so he had it with every drink, which is going to be multiple doses a day. And then I gave him when he was perky and starting to get really cantankerous. I moved him out to the regular pasture. And I gave him a remedy, homeopathic remedy for bony growths of the head, and shrunk it down in less than, I would say, 2 weeks max to the size of a walnut. So the remedies are amazing. You just have to pick it by what remedies are specific for those ailments. The reasons I made you formulas is sometimes that's difficult. It's very time consuming, and depending on the homeopathic expertise of the practitioner or the vet using these remedies is how familiar they are. The potencies I've used are fast. So they're no dinking around. The results you should expect are outstanding, actually. This Corynebacterium, by the way, is the bacteria that produces tooth decay. And prevention for tooth decay should happen with that Pro-Vitality. The remedy you have for hormonal wake-up is literally to increase your breeding and calf success. What do you call that? Want no open cattle, right? Or no open sheep. So this remedy is for use before you breed. And I gave you some suggestions. I said following weaning and before breeding to try to bring on a healthy cycle and diminish dry cows. We're going to do the same thing for sheep. The remedy will work across the board. Anti-bloat is really for treatment of a dangerous condition. And bloat happens almost instantly, I find, in sheep. I've had it in my own. Sheep that are put on fresh pasture in the spring, they'll get into something or eat something, and in an instant you have an emergency situation. That's what this remedy is for. I think this particular remedy, if you know that's going to happen, or the animals are vulnerable, or you're changing feed, if you use the alfalfa booster, you can create some prevention there. Travel stress, pretty obvious. If you medicate the mineral before you know you're going to move them, be a great idea. You're going to try travel stress and see if it works for stress for shearing your sheep, and let me know if that's enough for you. If not, I'll custom make it. Homeopathy is the most documented form of medicine in the world. These remedies have been used, some of them for 200 plus years. So we have clinical data that's unsurpassed by anything else you could ever find. Depictions and cases after case of use. So in homeopathy, there's nothing that hasn't been documented about the use of a remedy. If they thought it was effective, they documented it. Arthritic relief is pretty obvious. Again, I think a remedy that would more commonly be used in horses. Any of you have that issue with your mature herds? Arthritis relief?
Cattle?
Usually horses. Sore, achy, slow to get up. Another place that this remedy gets commonly used is for dogs. The old dog that barely gets off the floor and is stiff at that first movement. Once they get limbered up, they're feeling pretty good. They get to go outside or you offer them to eat, but that getting off the floor is tough, right? This remedy gives great relief. So remedies are available for other animals that we didn't discuss, like cats and dogs. So inbreeding, we don't see that too much with the kind of business that you're in, but we see it a lot in dogs with things like hip dysplasia, which we can give relief for with the remedy. Diminish the miserable state or the fact that they're degenerating at an early age.
So if it's an old injury, the injury combo, would that work on it?
It's not good for an old injury because there's a reason they don't heal. Most injuries don't heal due to a staph infection. So there's usually some impairment to getting well. If they heal, is a natural occurrence, is to heal at a rapid rate of speed. We're facilitating that. So when you have an old injury, like an achy knee as an example, or a bone that fails to mend, or let's say a wound that won't close, it's due to infection. So we can clean the wound out with a remedy by getting rid of, let's say, rocks or grit that was in a wound. And the other thing that we can do is get rid of the origin of the infection. So we'd use that anti-infection remedy, or the universal infection remedy is to use mastitis. If you don't know what's wrong and nothing normal is working, use the mastitis remedy. It's the strongest anti-infection remedy in this kit. It's very effective for problem solving. Infections of unknown origins, mastitis. It's a great formulation. The staph infection that mastitis comes from is actually staph from a stool, which is going to be, again, on the ground, right? The animal being in a dirty condition or a contaminated condition. So that remedy is very powerful. Okay?
Does that mastitis remedy work against, say, E. coli mastitis?
Sure. And the other one that I would consider for that is that you use the immunizer. If that remedy for mastitis hasn't fixed an infection, my next advice is that they go back to immunizer.
Could you comment on that twisted gut formula?
Sure. I formulated the remedy again for horses. I don't see it commonly in cattle. Usually by the time you find it, it's too late already, right? But this remedy, if you could get it in an emergency situation, that every 5 minutes, 3 times, repeat it again in 20 minutes, repeat it again in 20 minutes, I think will produce the best results that I've been able to get. And I would say it's probably a 50-50 remedy if the animals are really in crisis. But I did formulate it with a lot of thought to try to problem solve that issue. And I'd like some feedback about its usefulness for you, if you ever encounter that. What would produce twisted gut?
It can be a change in feed or parasite problem.
So interestingly enough, if you use the Pro Thrive or the Pro Vitality, right, for the minerals, is in the minerals is the anti-spasmodic magnesium, right? So it's very preventative for things like that. Silica, another remedy that's in that formulation, really great for keeping things bound up. So,
You were talking about silica in the skin. I saw a horse the other day that has a skin condition, and it's generalized, it's all over his body, and he loses his hair, and it gets kind of raw, and then if the lady just washes the lesions, then they dry up and heal, but it just keeps coming back.
so what's your perception of the origin of that complaint? Is it scabby at the base of the hair? Like parasitic?
It's not parasitic. No, I don't think it's parasitic, the horse. I actually did an acupuncture treatment on him. I haven't talked to her since then.
2 things. Antidote the immunization and use the poisoning combo, because I would imagine that it's the wormer.
Okay.
Between the 2.
Yeah, this horse came from a riding stable in New Mexico, and I'm sure he got vaccinated and dewormed all the time.
So that's what I would do. I say for all animals, if the first thing you do is antidote the vaccine, half the cases resolve. The other half, you have to go the next step and finish what you started. So in horses, it's going to be the wormer. So you want to use the poisoning combo, and it is in the horse kit.
Oh, okay.
It's in the horse selection. Cattle don't typically have that issue.
So if you're treating multiple animals in a sprayer, say, what would you do with the leftover? Would you the leftover in water or just?
It's a really good question.
Or
So the leftover water is only good for about 2 weeks because the water itself goes bad. The Remedi never does. But water is not a stable carrier. It won't hold it. No preservative. So it's only good for a couple weeks. So only make as much as you need. If you're only going to need a quart, make it appropriately. Okay? Because you're going to end up dumping it. Or the other choice is spray more mineral. Once it's dry on there, it's good forever. Okay?
okay.
Should be good, for an extended period of time.
I don't know, extreme heat or extreme cold.
It really doesn't matter.
Oh, it doesn't.
No. The only thing that will antidote the remedies is liniment. And liniment being camphorated. So nothing else will antidote it. Exception is antibiotics and steroids because they create suppression. Using them simultaneously is a little bit nuts because the drug is saying, go inside, be quiet, shut up, and the remedy's going, get out and don't come back. So they're opposite energies, okay? So the remedy is to facilitate a rapid. I always ask people to, if they're going to use them together, right, is they're going to have to use it more frequently and it'll take twice as long to accomplish it. If they use only the remedy, the results are profound. Yes?
This goes along with what Deb and Mary were saying, that somebody buys a half pint and they've only used a quarter of it. That half pint is still good as long as they keep it in.
She asked about putting it in water. The remedies have no expiration dates in liquid.
So set it the way they are there.
Right, they are masters, so they'll be good. But once you take from the master and put them in water, the water is what goes bad.
Right. But it's left in the bottles.
They're infinite.
And that it's something we don't want them keeping out in the barn where there's no temperature control.
They're perfectly fine wherever they are.
They are.
Sure.
Would freeze, wouldn't it?
I don't think they have enough alcohol in them, they shouldn't freeze. And if you find that they freeze, you need to let me know and I'll increase the alcohol so it doesn't freeze.
When you send them in a plastic sack. Is it better to keep them in that?
I just protect them for shipping, the fact that it's glass. The other thing you should get is you should get a dispenser that will pump. So you can actually dispense. The other one is that you can also use these master bottles, which hold an ounce to dispense in those and take them out in the field to medicate your water if that's where you're doing it. So that you have these for temporary use. The reason that they're in glass is because they last infinitely this way. They're sealed. Plastic doesn't have an infinite seal. So these remedies are good for a couple of years. They're not going to be good forever. So they're made for, for short-term use.
Could you use the remedy from the spritz bottle to mix with half a gallon?
Sure, absolutely. Sure, yeah. It's just that these bottles are, made for extended use. They're packaged that way. Doesn't mean that you're going to store it forever. The things that you should be using routinely or for having a large number of animals are packaged in the appropriate sizes for that. Once you get your animals re-immunized and use ProThrive, your problem should shrink. The amount of your herd that you have to medicate should be way below that 10% number that you would have to call otherwise. And for that milk cow, you should have a happy milk cow.
I have another question.
Sure.
About this horse with the skin condition.
Sure.
If I give him the anti-immunizer and poisoning combo, then if she revaccinates him or deworms him, and the skin condition comes back,
Then you know how sensitive he is, then you repeat it.
and she's an RN and she's going to be hard to convince, but
Okay, so what you do is you're going to put this remedy in a bottle, and you're going to say, use this remedy once a week for the next 6 weeks and tell me if this clears up. And it's going to be great, and she's going to be happy, and then she'll call you next year and go, oh, by the way, you got that thing back. And you go, okay, so dispense it to her again, or have her get out the spritz bottle and reuse it. You don't have to. The other thing you do is on your intake forms, all you have to do is put, are you interested in any type of alternative treatment, or do you mind if I use homeopathic remedies, and cover yourself so that whatever you give her is effective. Understanding it or explaining it is just too much work.
I was really hard to try and explain acupuncture because she's trained in Western medicine.
Sure. And really the greatest way to teach people homeopathy and is to do controlled double blind, if you'd like, is that you can get everybody to slam their finger in the car door or this nice big door right here, and all of us will have the same response. Your eyes roll back in your head, you suck some wind, it hurts like heck, your finger starts throbbing. You know that you're going to have trouble getting your jeans on for at least a week and that your nail might fall off. It's predictable. So if you take the homeopathic remedy, you divide the group into 3, and you give the group the homeopathic remedy every 5 minutes 3 times, the pain will go from a 10 to a 2. The people who can, in this double blind, can take some Tylenol or some Percocet if they sneak some, and they're going to have to take it every 4 hours, get constipated, their nail will still turn blue, and they'll remember that they did this stupid experiment every time they try to zip up their jeans. The third group we're going to give placebo to, and they're going to cuss their whole way through and sneak whatever it is they need for relief because they're going to be miserable, right? Is that homeopathic remedies are easy to prove in acutes. They're very difficult in chronic disease because we uniquely have our own genetic predispositions or what stressed us into a state of debility. So when we pick a remedy for a human, we're deducing what or how they're experiencing the pain, like whether their migraine be dull or throbbing, or that feels like they've got their head in a vice versus the whole top's going to blow off. So we pick the remedy for the sensation. The origin of the pathology is also different for each of those people. One has stress over their finances, another one ate too much chocolate, and another one is, got worried about whether or not they're going to lose their house. So the origin of the disease and the way we experience it is very unique. So we pick the remedy individualistically. When we have an acute, double blinds are really easy to do. So there's lots of reasons for the pathology, and we can pick a remedy that's specific. When we do acutes, that's how you get people's attention. They get hurt, fall down, or bump their head, and you have a big egg, and you give them 3 doses of arnica, it goes, pain gone, no bruise. That's how people get into homeopathy. So don't try. It's too hard sometimes. It's just the fact that it works. She might come back and go, okay, so what was that? How come that worked? And I stopped using this word and say that what I want to do is what's happening is the animals are over-immunized. So they're immunized so frequently they're actually sick from the vaccine. So proof of that is to do things like titers. So if you do the titer vaccine for rabies, for a dog as an example, and one titer, one immunization can last 10 years or more. So why are we re-immunizing? We give it to them enough to actually be making them sick.
I have wondered about that because I'm immunized against rabies and I have my titer checked every 2 years, and it's probably been 15 years since my last rabies vaccination, and I still have an adequate titer. So I wonder about these animals that we keep immunizing.
So what's happening is they have the autoimmune diseases of people. The dogs have lupus, they have diabetes, they have cancer. So we're making their immune systems non-functional. we're producing the disease with this maniac. When we could do single immunizations, like we did when we were kids, we got 5. Now the kids get 50. If they work, what are they doing?
So can over-immunization cause things in cats?
Sure. The first thing I do for all animals, that's number 1. In any kit, anytime I teach, do that first. Because it makes the exponential shift in the vitality. It's the biggest predictor of where disease is coming from, is we're packing it in, packing it in, packing it in, and this goes down in proportion. So when you minimize some of this, this goes right up. And then you may have other things, side effects, head injuries, you know, other things that we've done, stress, trauma. And then these are actually things you can work on to some degree and start moving them. Sometimes damage is permanent. We can still minimize it, like effects of a stroke. Or, you know, many nurses as clients of mine are have more surgeries than any other population. They're missing parts. They're absent more body parts than any other group of the population. They've had a mastectomy, a hysterectomy, you name it, they've had it. Their gallbladders are out, their appendix is out, it's a mess. There's a new article, I have to tell you this because this really causes me anxiety. I travel a lot, so I'm in the airport, and I go into the airport, the magazine rack, there's 50 magazines. So one of the magazines, and of recent there's a trend in having brains on the front of the magazines. Science, National Geographic, it's a really popular issue recently, is what's going on with the brain. So there's an article, a picture of the brain, and the article depiction on National Geographic is how much knowledge we've attained in studying the brain and how exponentially smarter science is in medicine because of it. So I buy the magazine and I read the article, and it goes on for 5 or 6 pages about fibers and mapping and colors and testing and documentation about all the different parts of the brain. Then it shows a woman in a wheelchair with her head wrapped in gauze with a bunch of electrodes on it, and it says, oh, this woman is going to benefit, women like this woman will benefit from all this research we've done, because once we identify what part of her brain the seizure disorder originates in, we can cut it out. Ah! That's progress. They have no way to fix it. They've identified where to cut. I mean, that's scary. And really the truth is that's where homeopathy shines, is knowing or mapping only produces evidence that you solved the problem. If the MRI has a blip in it or the diagnostics for seizures, and you can solve that, it's mappable. So the pathology only supports what homeopathy is actually able to do.
You can treat seizures with acupuncture too.
It's fabulous because it's a nervous system. Genius. The fact that this information exists and they're oblivious to it or not open to it is really kind of frightening. But documentably, and with the results that you'll be able to achieve, you will know that you accomplished your goal because the animals exponentially get better. They'll be healthier. You'll have less medicating and less culling to do. And the best of it is that you're going to be able to be in a market that's going to make you more profitable. Your expenses are reduced. You're going to buy less mineral. Just off the top, right? Then you're going to get more dollars per pound for your groceries because your quality of your product is increased. And I'm sure there's a market for that population that loves that you treat them humanely on top of that. That should be part of your plan. That's huge. People are interested in that. You got a custom market already, right? I sensitively raised compassion, my animals. So,
Doing it's one thing, selling it's a different category, but,
there'll be people that care, and that's who you're looking for.
well, I'm sure there are people that care.
And when you have 15 minutes, you should get on the schedule and talk about what are the marketing options, or what do other people know that would be good for you. All right, well, I want to thank you for coming.